On the night of July 16, 1918, the Romanov family, once the rulers of the vast Russian Empire, found themselves locked in the basement of a merchant's house in Ekaterinburg, the walls, bare and suffocating, closing on them as they awaited orders from their captors. Tsar Nicholas II, the former Emperor of Russia, held the hand of his sickly son, Alexei, while Empress Alexandra whispered prayers under her breath. Outside, the distant sound of boots crunching against gravel signaled that their fate was approaching. They had been prisoners for months, torn from their palatial existence into a world of uncertainty and fear. Now, with the Russian Civil War raging, whispers of their potential rescue spread like wildfire. But the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, had other plans. The dynasty that had ruled Russia for over 3 centuries was about to meet a gruesome and mysterious end, one that would leave the world questioning the truth for decades. To understand the horror that unfolded that night, we must rewind to the events that led to the family's tragic downfall. For centuries, the Romanovs were Russia's absolute rulers. Their dynasty wielded immense power, their lives filled with extravagance and opulence. However, by the early 20th century, their grip on the country began to slip. Economic turmoil, political unrest, and the disastrous effects of World War I had turned the people against them. But perhaps nothing fueled the people's resentment more than Grigory Rasputin, the enigmatic Siberian mystic who would become the royal family's closest advisor. Rasputin's influence over Empress Alexandra, especially in matters concerning her hemophiliac son, Alexei, led to widespread rumors of corruption and manipulation. When he was murdered in 1916, it was too late. The Romanovs had lost the people's trust. By 1917, the Russian Revolution erupted. Nicholas II, under immense pressure, abdicated the throne. The once mighty ruler of Russia was reduced to a mere prisoner. After their abdication, the Romanovs were shuffled from one place of imprisonment to another. At first, they were held in relative comfort, but as the revolution intensified, their situation grew more dire. In April 1918, the Bolsheviks transferred the family to the Ipatiev house in Ekaterinburg, a bleak and heavily guarded residence that would become their final home. Conditions inside were grim. The royal family, accustomed to luxury, now lived under constant surveillance. Letters were censored. Food was rationed, and their captors treated them with increasing hostility. The Tsar and his family still clung to hope, believing they might be sent into exile. But the Bolsheviks had different intentions. As weeks passed, the mood inside the Ipatiev house grew more ominous. The guards who once showed moments of sympathy became colder. The family's possessions were slowly taken away. Alexandra, ever devout, took solace in religion, while Nicholas tried to maintain normalcy for his children. Yet, eerie signs suggested something more sinister loomed. Witnesses later recalled how furniture was moved into basement, how soldiers whispered among themselves, and how the family was suddenly forbidden from going outside. Then, on the evening of July 16th, the Romanovs were told to prepare for a move. They were instructed to dress, as transport to a safer location was imminent. Alexandra and her daughters carefully sewed jewels into their corsets, believing they would need them in exile. Nicholas carried Alexei down the stairs. It was well past midnight when the Romanovs were led into the basement, a dimly lit, claustrophobic room. A few wooden chairs were arranged in the center, and the Tsar was told to take a seat. Alexandra stood beside him, holding her son. The 4 daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, clung to each other. Their doctor and a handful of loyal servants were also present. They waited. Then the door opened. A group of armed men entered, led by Yakov Yurovsky, the commandant of the Ipatiev house. He unfolded a piece of paper and cleared his throat. The words that followed shattered the silence and sealed the fate of the Romanovs. Nicholas Alexandrovich, in view of the fact that your relatives are continuing their attack on Soviet Russia, the Euro-Soviet has decided to execute you. Nicholas barely had time to react before Yurovsky raised his revolver. A shot rang out, followed by the deafening crack of gunfire as chaos erupted in the room. The former Tsar slumped forward, dead before he could process the betrayal. Alexander screamed, shielding Alexei. The daughters shrieked as bullets tore through the air. But as the dust settled, something horrifying became apparent. Some of the Romanovs were still alive. And that's when the executioners realized something chilling. Gunfire echoed to the basement of the Ipatiev house, the deafening shots mingling with the screams of the Romanov daughters. Nicholas II lay lifeless, blood pooling beneath his slumped body. Alexandra had collapsed beside him, her arms still wrapped protectively around Alexei. But something was wrong. Some of the Romanovs were still moving. The executioners, expecting a swift end, watched in shock as the daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, struggled on the blood-stained floor, seemingly impervious to the bullets. The reason for their resilience became horrifyingly clear. Beneath their dresses, sewn into their corsets, were diamonds and other precious jewels. Hidden wealth meant to aid them in their escape. The makeshift armor had deflected the bullets, turning what should have been a swift execution into a gruesome, prolonged massacre. Panicked and disoriented, the executioners reloaded their weapons. More shots rang out. Yurovsky, furious at the botched execution, stepped forward and fired point-blank into the heads of the remaining survivors. By the time silence returned to the room, the entire Romanov family and their loyal attendants were dead, or so it seemed. In the aftermath, the executioners hastily worked to dispose of the bodies, fearing the White Army, loyal to the Romanovs, might discover what had taken place. The corpses were wrapped in sheets, loaded onto a truck, and driven out of the city under the cover of darkness. But the original burial site proved problematic. The truck became stuck in the mud, forcing the executioners to change their plan. Under immense pressure, they decided to burn 2 of the bodies, while the others were hastily dumped into a shallow grave in the Koptyaki forest. Yet, when the White Army arrived days later, expecting to find evidence of the massacre, something was amiss. The bodies were gone. Rumors swirled. Had all the Romanovs been executed? Had someone escaped? As the White Army took control of Ekaterinburg, an investigation into the Romanovs' fate began. Witnesses, guards, and even locals near the Ipatiev house were questioned, but their statements only deepened the mystery. Some claimed to have heard multiple gunshots and screams at night, while others reported seeing bodies carried away under cover of darkness. But a few locals swore they saw a woman, injured, bloodied, but alive, fleeing into the forest. Could one of the Romanov daughters have survived? Further confusion arose when investigators combed the execution site and the surrounding area. While bullet casings and bloodstains confirmed that violence had taken place, the shallow grave discovered in the woods held only partial remains. 2 bodies were missing. Had the executioners failed to kill everyone? If so, where were the missing bodies? As news of the Romanovs' execution spread, theories emerged. The most persistent and haunting of them all? That Anastasia, the youngest of the 4 daughters, had somehow survived. Soon after the White Army's arrival in Ekaterinburg, reports surfaced that a young woman matching Anastasia's description had been spotted in nearby villages. Others claimed she had been smuggled out of Russia by sympathizers. Then, in 1920, a woman named Anna Anderson surfaced in Berlin, claiming to be Anastasia Romanov. She bore a striking resemblance to the princess, knew intimate details about the family, and spoke fluent Russian despite being found in Germany. Some dismissed her as a fraud, while others believed she was the last surviving Romanov. If Anastasia had lived, where had she gone? And more importantly, who had helped her escape? Meanwhile, the Bolsheviks, now consolidating power under Lenin, remained eerily silent about the fate of the Romanovs. For weeks, the world waited for confirmation. Then, on July 19, 1918, a chilling announcement was made. Nicholas II has been executed. His family has been moved to a secure location. The wording was suspicious. Why admit to killing Nicholas but not the others? Were the Bolsheviks hiding something? Had they failed to kill the entire Romanov family? In the years that followed, conflicting reports emerged. Some Soviet officials claimed all members of the family had died, while others insisted that at least one had been spared. Documents were destroyed, records were altered, and the truth became buried beneath layers of propaganda. The lack of clear answers only fueled speculation. What really happened that night in the basement of the Ipatiev house? Just when it seemed the case would never be solved, a shocking development emerged. Decades later, in the 1970s, a former Soviet official near death confessed to a chilling truth. Not all of them died in that basement. But before he could reveal more, he died under mysterious circumstances. Then, in 1979, amateur investigators stumbled upon something horrifying deep in the Ural Mountains, a hidden grave containing multiple skeletal remains. But something was wrong. The number of bodies didn't match the known victims. And worst of all, 2 skeletons were still missing. Who were they? Had the bodies been moved? Or had someone, perhaps Anastasia, managed to escape the fate that befell the rest of the Romanovs? The chilling confession of the Soviet official, not all of them died in that basement, was enough to send shockwaves through historians and investigators alike. Then, in 1979, a group of amateur researchers scouring the Ural Mountains stumbled upon something horrifying. Buried beneath layers of dirt and decay, human remains were uncovered in a shallow grave near the Koptyaki forest. The skeletal remains showed signs of violent trauma, bullet holes in the skulls, shattered bones, and hastily discarded jewelry. Experts quickly pieced together a grim realization. This was the Romanov family, or at least part of it, because something was wrong. There were too few bodies. Of the 11 people executed in the basement of the Ipatiev house, Tsar Nicholas II, Tsarina Alexandra, their 5 children, and 4 attendants, only 9 skeletons were found in the grave. 2 bodies were missing. Forensic experts confirmed that one of the missing bodies belonged to Alexei, the young heir to the Russian throne. The other, one of the Romanov daughters. The revelation reignited a decades-old controversy. Had Anastasia or Maria survived the execution? As media outlets rushed to cover the new discovery, a mysterious informant came forward with a chilling story. An elderly woman, who had been a young servant in Ekaterinburg at the time, claimed she had seen something the night of the execution, something that had haunted her for over 60 years. Through tears, she recalled how, in the early hours of July 17, 1918, a cart left the Ipatiev house under heavy guard. But instead of heading toward the forest like the others, it took a different route. Inside, she swore she saw a young girl, barely alive, her head slumped forward, but her chest still rising and falling. "I thought it was a corpse at first," the woman whispered, "but then I saw her breathing. They took her away, somewhere far. She wasn't dead. Not yet." Had one of the Romanov daughters survived? And if so, where had she been taken? As the years passed, Soviet officials maintained strict silence regarding the execution of the Romanovs. It was not until 1991, after the fall of the Soviet Union, that the truth finally began to surface. Declassified documents revealed disturbing details. Testimonies from the executioners suggested that 2 bodies were removed from the main burial site and burned separately. But there was no photographic or forensic proof. Had the missing bodies truly been destroyed, or had something more sinister occurred? Adding to the mystery, secret KGB files reference a Romanov prisoner held under an undisclosed location well into the 1920s. Who was this prisoner? And why had the records been buried for so long? As forensic teams worked tirelessly to confirm the identities of the discovered remains, another horrifying piece of evidence surfaced. A fragment of a handwritten note, found among the executioner's belongings, contained a cryptic message. One was spared. The order was given. The secret remains. Who had given the order? And more importantly, where had the missing Romanov gone? The discovery of the Romanov grave had sent shockwaves across the world. Historians, forensic experts, and conspiracy theorists were all asking the same question. What happened to the missing bodies? In Russia, panic spread among those who had kept the Romanov execution a closely guarded secret. Former Soviet officials, now aging men with failing memories, were reluctant to speak. Some outright denied any cover-up, while others hinted at something more sinister. One former KGB agent, in a rare and cryptic interview, muttered a single sentence before refusing to say more. "There are things worse than death." With mounting international pressure, Russian authorities reopened the investigation into the Romanov executions. Historians combed through old Soviet records, and forensic experts analyzed every inch of the burial site. Then, in a classified archive deep within Moscow, researchers uncovered something chilling. A set of documents marked Top Secret, Priority Case 1918. Inside were reports detailing how the execution of the Romanovs had not gone as planned. One file, dated July 18, 1918, contained an urgent message from Ekaterinburg to Moscow. One of the girls survived. Orders. The response was even more cryptic. Secure her. No witnesses. She must not be found. Who had sent this order? And more importantly, who had received it? As the investigation deepened, an anonymous source delivered a chilling photograph to a journalist in St. Petersburg. The grainy image, dated 1922, showed a young woman with piercing blue eyes and delicate features strikingly similar to the Romanov daughters. Beneath the photo, a single phrase was scrawled in Russian. She lived. The journalist, fearing for his safety, attempted to track the origins of the photograph, but days later, he vanished without a trace. When authorities searched his apartment, they found it ransacked. His notes, files, and the mysterious photograph, gone. The only thing left behind was his personal notebook, in which he had scribbled a final, frantic message. They are watching me. The secret is bigger than we thought. Meanwhile, a historian working closely with the investigation received an anonymous tip. An old man, now near death, was ready to confess. When she arrived at his remote cabin, he was waiting. His face was sunken, his hands trembling as he clutched a small, rusted box. "I was there," he whispered. "I was part of it." Inside the box were yellow documents, Soviet-era stamps still intact. Among them was a chilling report from 1919. The girl has been transported. She remains under observation. We await further orders. The historian's heart pounded. "Where did they take her?" she asked. The old man's eyes filled with fear. "To the place where no one returns," he murmured, "where the ghosts whisper in the walls." Then, just as he was about to say more, the cabin door burst open. A masked figure rushed in, gun in hand. A single gunshot echoed through the night. The historian barely escaped with her life. But the old man, he was silenced forever. And as she ran, clutching the rusted box, she realized the truth. The secret of the Romanovs wasn't just a mystery. It was a warning. The shocking revelations about the Romanov execution had reignited old wounds in Russia. The public outcry was immediate. How could the Soviet government have buried such a dark secret for nearly a century? The world demanded answers. The Russian government, under intense international pressure, held an official inquiry into the Romanov murders. Scientists confirmed that most of the family's remains matched the DNA of Tsar Nicholas II and Empress Alexandra. But the two missing bodies, believed to be Grand Duchess Anastasia and Tsarevich Alexei, remained a haunting mystery. Then, in a move that sent shockwaves through the country, Russian authorities announced the arrest of former high-ranking Soviet archivist. The man, now in his late 80s, was accused of tampering with classified documents related to the Romanov case. In a dramatic courtroom appearance, he made a chilling statement. "There are things about that night you were never meant to know." When pressed for details, he simply shook his head. "If I talk, I won't live to see tomorrow." 2 days later, he was found dead in his cell. Official reports listed it as a heart attack, but many suspected otherwise. The Romanov murders had always been shrouded in myth, but now, disturbing theories were gaining traction. One of the most infamous urban legends claimed that one of the Romanov daughters, perhaps Anastasia, had survived the massacre. For decades, various women had come forward claiming to be the lost princess. The most famous of them, Anna Anderson, spent years fighting for recognition, though DNA tests later disproved her claim. But now, with the new evidence suggesting a survivor was secured and transported elsewhere, people began questioning everything. Had Anastasia truly died in that basement in 1918, or had she been spirited away to an unknown fate? More importantly, if she had survived, what had become of her? As independent researchers delved deeper into the case, they uncovered a hidden Soviet bunker buried beneath a military facility in the Ural Mountains. Inside, old steel filing cabinets contained decades of classified records. Most were mundane Cold War documents. But one folder marked Special Operations 1918 to 1924 held something terrifying. A typed report dated December 1921 read, "Subject remains under observation. Communication restricted. Orders remain unchanged. No release. No burial. No trace." And beneath it, a handwritten note in faded ink. She keeps asking about her family. She doesn't know they are gone. Despite forensic evidence, confessions, and official reports, the full truth about the Romanov massacre remained elusive. Had the execution gone as planned? Had a secret survivor been hidden away, their fate lost to history? Or, as some whispered, had the Romanovs' deaths merely been the beginning of something far darker? Even today, the abandoned Ipatiev house in Ekaterinburg, where the Romanovs were murdered, carries an eerie reputation. Locals speak of strange shadows moving across the ruins at night. Some claim to hear voices, soft, pleading whispers in the darkness. A century later, the ghosts of the Romanovs refuse to rest, and the nightmare isn't over yet. Just when it seemed like the case of the Romanov murders had finally reached a resolution, a disturbing revelation sent shockwaves through the world. A historian working deep within Russia's state archives stumbled upon something terrifying, an aged, yellowed envelope marked with a single word, truth. Inside was a photograph. It showed a girl, no older than 16, dressed in simple clothing. But her eyes, those unmistakable Romanov blue eyes, sent shivers down the historian's spine. Scrawled on the back of the photo, in faded ink, were the words, "They will never find her. She is ours now." The date on the back? August 1918, 1 month after the Romanov execution. Within days of this discovery, another bizarre development rocked the case. A man who had once been an officer in the Soviet secret police, a man who had allegedly been involved in the Romanov murders, came forward with a shocking confession. "We never killed them all," he whispered in a recorded statement. One was spared, but only for something worse. But before he could reveal any more details, he abruptly retracted his statement. "I was mistaken," he said, visibly shaken. "Forget what I said. I should not have spoken." 2 days later, he was found dead. Officials ruled it a suicide, but many suspected otherwise. Speculation exploded. If a Romanov had truly survived, who had orchestrated the deception? Was this merely a last-minute act of mercy from a remorseful Bolshevik guard? Or was there something far more sinister at play? Some researchers pointed to a secret faction within the early Soviet government. Men who believed that killing the Romanovs outright was a mistake. "A dead monarch is a martyr," an old Bolshevik document read. "But a living one can be controlled." Had one of the Romanov children been taken, not to be saved, but to be used? If so, for what purpose? The resurfacing of these mysteries sent the world into a frenzy. Conspiracy theorists, historians, and internet sleuths all searched desperately for answers. Protests erupted in Russia, with the public demanding full transparency from the government. If they had information about a surviving Romanov, they had to release it, but the Kremlin remained silent. Then, without warning, the state archives when the mysterious photo had been found was sealed off indefinitely. The historian who made the discovery, he vanished without a trace. Just when it seemed like the truth would remain forever buried, an independent journalist received a package. Inside was a single, chilling document. It was an old Soviet psychiatric report. The subject's name had been redacted, but the description was clear. Female, estimated age, 16 to 18, diagnosed with severe psychosis, frequent outbursts about a missing family and voices in the dark. Believes she is royalty. Patient is confined indefinitely. No visitors permitted. The date on the report? 1935. If it was real, it meant that one of the Romanov daughters, possibly Anastasia, had lived for at least 17 years after the execution. But what had happened to her after that? No one knows. Perhaps she was locked away until her mind broke. Perhaps she was eliminated once she was no longer useful. Or perhaps, just perhaps, her descendants are still out there today, unaware of the bloodline they carry. More than a century has passed since the Romanovs met their brutal end, yet their story refuses to die. The truth remains buried under layers of deception, political intrigue, and fear. The Romanov name still haunts Russia. And for those who dare to dig too deep, the past has a way of claiming them. Some mysteries were never meant to be uncovered, and some ghosts refuse to rest. The murder of the Romanov family remains one of history's darkest tragedies, an event that reshaped Russia and still raises questions today. Were all the Romanovs truly executed that night? Or did one escape, only to meet a different kind of horror? What do you think really happened? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this deep dive into historical true crime, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more chilling stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, history hides many secrets.